Lines in the French newspapers, and for that I'm joined by Caterina Vitosi. Hello again, Caterina.
Hello.
Starting off with the front page of Le Monde.
Yes, and Le Monde leading with the story of 75 socialist MPs who've made a really strong call to the French President François Hollande to come through on one of his campaign promises, which was to give the right to vote to foreigners who've legally been living in France for 5 years or more. This is the right to vote in local elections. Now, this is been something that's been on sort of the socialist radar for, well, nearly 30 years, in fact. And it was, as I said, on François Hollande's campaign manifesto, these 75 MPs say we want it now, we want people to be able to vote in the 2014 legislative elections. However, the government is saying, we do want to do it, perhaps now just isn't quite the right time. They say there's other priorities that they've got to come through with first. The Interior Minister, he goes as far as to say perhaps it would be a dangerous thing to do right now. It could make the divide between left and the right and the extreme right even deeper, even more profound. So something which is very much on the agenda, but TBC, to be confirmed as to when exactly it will be implemented.
All right, moving on to the left-leaning Libération, which looks at some of the different consequences of the anti-Islam film.
Yes, in particular, focusing on the case of Salman Rushdie. This is the British Indian author who, back in the late 80s, wrote a book which really sort of had a similar impact as we're seeing now with this anti-Islam film. His book, The Satanic Verses, in fact, it incurred a fatwa on his head. This was a price on his head put on it by the religious Iran's religious leaders. That price now, however, has been increased. It's been increased by $500,000. Leaders in Iran saying, if the fatwa had been carried out in the first place, maybe we wouldn't have been seeing a film like The Innocence of Muslims being created now. However, what is quite interesting, the editorial in Libération, first, they note Salman Rushdie's response to this, which is sort of the cartoon Popeye-inspired, I am what I am. So no apologies from him for writing this book. But also the paper says, it's wrong for political leaders to sort of be grabbing on the coattails of this public feeling. They say that leaders should be calming down the rhetoric. They should be looking for ways to promote peace rather than carrying out actions like this, which sort of will further fan the flames of this issue. However, there's a very interesting piece also in the Communist Daily L'Humanité, which says, actually, look at the numbers. The Arab world isn't going up in flames. Sure, there are protests, but they're limited. They look at the example of Indonesia, which is the world's largest Muslim community. They say they've got more than 250 million Muslims. Only about 700 protesters have actually turned up on the streets. So they say, calm down the rhetoric. In fact, what we need to make sure is that we guard as much against Islamophobia as we do against Islamic extremism. So it's a very interesting piece.
Moving on now to the situation in northern Mali, and that's in religious daily La Croix.
Yes, this, as you can see, north of Mali, oppression and fear. They sent reporters to the northern region of Mali since beginning mid-June has become under the control of Islamic extremists who have imposed Sharia law on the region. Now, the paper talks to people who are living in this region who don't want to be governed by Sharia law. They've just, by victim of being where they are, have found themselves in this situation. And the oppression and fear that they refer to in the title there, really quite terrifying stories, actually, of corporal punishment being issued in the streets. They're saying that, people are being forced to flee to the south of the country to live in the more secular society, which they had been hitherto accustomed to in the north.
And finally, some good news for those lucky enough to have some shares in the French stock market.
Oh, yes. Well, if you've got shares in some of the top earners in the CAC 40, you'll be
Sadly,
laughing.
I don't.
Well, it really is a shame because they're paying out bumper dividends for the year of 2012. This will be paid out next spring. Analysts who spoke to the financial paper say there's going to be a 5% increase in share dividends for people that have shares in these top earners. This is despite economic problems, but it's said to be companies want to be seen to be rewarding investors for sticking with them through the difficult couple of years we've seen. So good news for you if you do have shares in them. Too bad, tough luck for those like us who perhaps don't.
Well, good for them. All right, thank you very much, Katerina. You're watching Live from Paris. A reminder